Howdy, Compelled Unbeliever here. Today we're going to look at Breaking in the Habits video, Catholic Church, Sell Everything and Give to the Poor. Should the Catholic Church sell everything and give to the poor? No. It just got real.
Oh, wow.
In this video, Casey here, and I'm not doxing him, he does have his name on his YouTube channel. It's on the internet, so. But anyway, Casey here is going to discuss a really good question. Should the Catholic Church sell everything and give to the poor? My background on this is I know very little about the Catholic Church, actually, at least the procedures and rituals and so forth. However, I have spent 6 months in intensive study on the Catholic Church. I read about 4 different, 7-volume series on the history of the Catholic Church. And I've also done studies throughout the years, on and off, into the Catholic Church, particularly when you need to study early Christian history. You have to study the Catholic Church. So I've done it from a historical perspective. So while I cannot tell you how the financials of the Vatican work today, because I don't care, I can tell you, if you give me any particular thing that they do, I can tell you with pretty good accuracy off the top of my head historically how they got there and why. So that's where I'm going to look at this video from. And I also want to be fair with the churches. So let's take a look at what Casey has to say and go on with it.
If you've ever been to the Vatican, you have no doubt been filled with many awe-inspiring questions. How did people build something this incredible? How many millions of people have had their lives changed because of this place? How could anyone walk into this building and remain an atheist? At least that's what I thought. Unfortunately, many others can only wonder, how rich is the Catholic Church and why doesn't it give its money to the poor?
Okay, well, this is a fair question. It doesn't necessarily only apply to the Catholic Church. This can also apply to Judaism or Islam or anything else. When you have people, particularly poor people, which poor people tend to make up the demographic of the people giving to most churches. And there's a reason for that I won't get into, not today. So it is a legitimate question. Let's see his justification here. The one thing, I did look at this video briefly before. I don't think he mentions that it does say specifically in the Bible, Jesus tells his disciples basically to sell everything and follow him. Anyways, because I guarantee you he is not going to say anything about that, because the Catholic Church is going directly against this teaching.
At first glance, these may appear to be fair questions. When you look at the Vatican, look at all the land and expensive art and incredible real estate that the Church owns all around the world, it can be easy to become a bit jaded. Surely this organization is loaded and shouldn't be tax exempt, but is it really? This is Catholicism in Focus. To start off, let's try to get a grasp on what we're actually dealing with here. Heavy emphasis on the word try. The fact of the matter is that no one, not even the Church itself, has any way of accurately estimating the Church's wealth. Being a worldwide organization existing for centuries before careful tax records were instituted, there is unfortunately no central file that we can just look up.
I do not remember the source that I saw this from. About 3-4 years ago, the last time I looked into the estimated value of the Catholic Church, it's into $1 trillion. Now, what he does here is he tries to go specifically to the Vatican, and the all the Vatican's assets aren't at the Vatican or even necessarily controlled directly by the Vatican. It's almost like a businessman having subsidiary businesses. If he owns one business, it doesn't have anything to do with the other business. And so but all of these different dioceses and so forth do contribute to the Vatican. So basically, everybody is working for the Vatican and giving money to the Vatican. It's a central government, if you want to call it that. And the Vatican itself is a country inside of Italy. It's the smallest country in the world, I believe, like 14 acres.
Said, even just a cursory glance at the Church gives a pretty obvious conclusion. The Church has got some enormous assets. Estimates range from 250 to 500,000 square miles of land worldwide, on which are thousands of buildings, often grand and ornate, filled with expensive art, vestments, and sacred vessels. Add that to the revenue gained from investments and donations, and we're talking about a lot of money. And that's even before we look at the wealth attached to the church's enormous reach in the world of medicine, schools, and public organizations. That's another major source of income and a long...
In the United States government will give money to the Catholic Church and other churches if they say they are performing certain services that the government feels it needs to provide, such as, birth control and so forth. The United States government will give money to churches to support programs like Planned Parenthood, whatever, all branded their own way. Now, they are supposed to not prophesize or try to evangelize or anything else, but a lot of these organizations will refuse to give certain services. Not only are the people of the Catholic Church donating, but you also have governments that are donating to these different charities and so forth. So it's really not costing the Catholic Church much of anything, if anything at all.
Long list of assets. But before we conclude that the church is rich beyond our wildest dreams, let's scratch a bit beneath the surface here. For one thing, the church is not a monolithic corporation. While obviously structured hierarchically in an ecclesiastical sense, in business terms, each diocese and local church is essentially its own independent entity. Around the world, there are roughly 2,800 dioceses.
Okay, we could also look at this as a franchise. The local diocese buys their local Catholic churches or their local hamburger stands, and they pay dues to the corporation, the hamburger stand corporation, or whatever corporation you want to call it. So yes, what he's saying is true. And is each diocese, each franchise owner responsible for their own finances and their own restaurants? Yes, they're all subject to the corporation. In this case, the Catholic Church is subject to the Vatican.
All entirely decentralized from the Vatican. Some, like the Archdiocese of Cologne, have a long history, and so may consider itself the steward of enormous assets. Other dioceses, in fact, most dioceses, are far more missionary in nature, meaning that they hold very little in assets and may actually carry considerable debt. The same goes...
And you notice here he said they carry considerable debt. So the services, these missions or whatever that aren't making money for the Catholic Church, are not being supported by the Catholic Church. That is exactly what you do in a business. If something's not making money, you don't invest in that. You don't do that anymore. You only stick to what is making money. Now, you could have side projects that aren't necessarily making a lot of money. You aren't losing money on it, but they are getting your business's name out there. So you're going to continue building those products or whatever just to get your name out there to build the company. Just like with these missions. They're not losing anything with the missions. They're getting supported by people on the outside. It doesn't have anything to do with the diocese, with the Vatican. They don't care. Moving right along, let's see what else we got to say.
Schools, colleges, orphanages, shelters, and other institutions of the church. They may be under the direction of church leaders, but that doesn't mean the church owns or directly benefits financially from them. Just because the Pope may be the spiritual leader of it all, doesn't mean that he owns it all. In that case, let's look at the Vatican on...
However, he does control it all, and he also gets tribute, if you want to call it that, from all. So yeah, he is the absolute center, and his word is law, period. End of story for every diocese, no matter what. The only way that they can protest or do anything is to actually rebel from the Catholic Church, which has happened several times in Catholic history.
On its own, as the Pope is entirely in charge of its financial assets. Clearly, the Vatican has some riches. Why doesn't he sell them? It's a question that gets a lot of press at times, but it necessitates a further question as a response.
Honestly, as a historian, I would hate to see the treasures of the Vatican piecemealed out. I think where they are is a great place. That's strictly from a historian's perspective. When you get to a human perspective, if this entity, business, religion, whatever you want to call it, this country, the Vatican, if they care about people, and that was their primary concern, then these riches wouldn't be of any value to them. What they would value is what helps mankind. That's what you keep. That's what you hold on to. So what this is an indication of, whatever the riches, all of these monies that the Catholic Church does have, that they aren't spending on humanitarian things. It just shows you what they do value. And it goes for all of us as human beings, and it does show us our faults and it shows us our strengths. But it is something that we need to look at. And it does also go for corporations and countries and religion.
To whom? When we look at all the assets of the church, a giant building, priceless works of art, sacred vessels used in religious rites, ancient artifacts, all of which estimated by the Vatican to be worth around $1.65 billion, we have to realize that just because something is worth a lot doesn't mean that you could actually get that money if you want it. You can't just sell the Vatican to an Italian developer. If they knock it down and build apartments, it'll make far less revenue than it was worth, and if they try to run it as is, it won't be as attractive because it's no longer the central church of Catholicism where the Pope lives. When it comes to the arts, gold, and artifacts of the church, yes, technically it is possible that the church could find dealers to sell them to.
Actually, if you were to make the Vatican into a museum, there wouldn't be all the expenses that the Pope incurs, and about his public relations and so forth that Casey will go into here in a minute.
But who says the church has that right anyway? The church certainly doesn't see it that way. In 2015,
let's look at this again. What did he just say there? This is just great.
When it comes to the arts, gold, and artifacts of the church, yes, technically it is possible that the church could find dealers to sell them to, but who says the church has that right anyway? The church certainly doesn't see it that way.
The church doesn't see it that way. They don't have the right to sell these assets. The church does not have the right to sell their own assets because they are God's. Then who had the right to purchase these assets? Do they feel they have the right to purchase them but not to sell them? That's kind of odd.
In 2015, Pope Francis was asked why the church doesn't sell its patrimony for the poor, and he responded as every pope in recent memory has. They are not the treasures of the church, they are the treasures of humanity.
Okay, so they are not the treasures of the church. They are the treasures of humanity. Then why not share it with humanity? Why hold it up in your church? Why hold it up in the Vatican? That is the exact opposite of what you are declaring here. This is pitiful. This is pathetic. It's disgusting to see this statement.
In our eyes, at least, we're nothing more than stewards and caretakers of European history.
I noticed in editing this quick bait and switch that he uses here that it's not the Catholic Church assets, it's European history. So it's not Catholic history, it's European history. Here he's trying to justify again the withholding of these assets, right or wrong.
Not its owners, which, as you can imagine, comes at a price. While the Vatican Museum charges a modest €16 for tours, cheaper than the National History Museum in New York, I should add, St. Peter's Basilica itself is entirely free to enter, meaning that the cost of upkeep, restorations, and employees is largely paid for from a deficit, which...
Now you're going to start talking about this deficit. It doesn't matter what major corporation it is, the administration itself does not produce anything. They support the production, but they do not produce anything. They do not sell anything. They do not make anything or make money specifically. It's the production part or the sales part or whatever else that actually makes the money. So your administration, the Vatican, the administration, the central government of the Catholic Church is an administrative entity. They do not produce anything. They do not do anything. So they will always operate at a deficit. That's just how it works. So of course it operates at a deficit, but now he's going to try to conflate that and act like the Catholic Church gross capita doesn't increase every year and that the Vatican doesn't make more money every year. So he's just being dishonest here and purposely misleading. To be this detailed about how misleading he's being, he has to be very well versed and purposely misleading.
Which the church is entirely happy to do because it's important to preserve our history and to share it with the world. In fact, the entire budget of the Vatican, largely filled with charitable cost, runs a deficit every year. Beyond the $78 million spent on the administration of the patrimony of the Holy See in 2019, the Vatican spent $76 million on the Secretariat of State, $43 million of which was sent all around the world to diplomatic missions. $54 million went to the dicastery of communications, employing 530 people to transmit the message of the Pope in 40 languages over TV, radio, social media, print, and photography. $25 million went to the Congregation for Evangelization of Peoples, a department that supports churches in mission territories, $19 million of which went to Eastern Rite churches, mostly in the Middle East. $10 million went to the Vatican Library, and $7 million went to the dicastery for promoting integral human development.
Okay, let's take a look at this list here. I love this list. Let's
and
look at it.
$7 million went to the dicastery for promoting integral human.
Okay, so now what he's going to do is he's going to go into how there's all these wonderful charities and so forth that the Catholic Church provides. Totally you wouldn't have if it wasn't for the Catholic Church. And I'm not undermining by any means the churches that do charitable humanitarian thing. I am not undermining that. I agree with that, and I think it's good. But let's look at this. Administration of Patrimony of the Holy See. So it's basically just paying the bean counters, okay? All the people in the administration. The Secretariat of State. So I guess this is like the Secretary of State or something like that. $76 million? $54 million for communications, which basically is there's a communications like secretary, and they're kind of in charge of disseminating everything in every language and so forth. So they're in charge of the media and so forth, making sure that that's disseminated in different venues, be it a print, podcast, or whatever they're going to do. And that position's been there for a very long time. $25 million in evangelization. I'm not even going to try to say it. I'm stuttering too much right now. That's basically like trying to go get more people to give you more money. That's a profitable thing any way you look at it if they're doing their jobs well. The Vatican Library, $10 million, and $7 million for promoting human development. I don't know what that is. That's nothing I've studied in the history of the Catholic Church. I have no clue. Don't really care. If you look at any of these expenses, it doesn't put one coat on one child. It does not feed one person. This is just to perpetuate the Vatican, to make it keep going. But none of these does anything to help anyone. We've got, I don't know, 200 million, something like that, in expenses that are incurred that would not be incurred if you gave to a charity directly. So that is a lot of money that is not going to the children and what have you. So I just want to put things in perspective. And anytime you have a middleman, and it works this way in business, it works this way in international relations. Anytime you have a middleman, it gets expensive and things don't work as well. It gets slower. The more direct communication you can have, the better. The church is the middleman that just isn't necessary. Do they do a lot of good? Yes, they can. Are they necessary? Absolutely not. It's just a middleman that is not needed.
Human development. That is a lot of money going towards the benefit of others, ultimately causing the Vatican to post a deficit of $13 million last year. Anyone saying that the Vatican is getting rich off this stuff is crazy.
That's just looking at the administrative costs, everything that it costs. Because they do not produce anything, they are going to have a deficit. That doesn't mean that they aren't bringing in hundreds of millions or billions upon billions of dollars. That is an entirely different thing, and he's purposely lying and misrepresenting this. And this makes me very sad to see this, but this is what's going on.
We literally lose millions of dollars every year, which presents a really interesting question regarding the church selling all of its possessions for the sake of the poor. While seemingly altruistic and the right thing to do, one has to wonder, practically speaking, what good it would actually do. Let's say that the Vatican did try to sell everything it owned, all $1.65 billion in assets. And let's say that every diocese in the world did the same, totaling, I don't know, another 50 billion, 500 billion, $1 trillion worldwide. A lot of money for sure. Until you realize that the United States government, just one nation in the entire world, spends $1 trillion on Social Security alone every single year.
Wow, this isn't a fallacy. Well, yeah, look what they do. And actually, he just quoted a entity that actually helps people, that does help people that are poor. That's what Social Security does. It's once you retire, it gives you something to live on. So it does help people. But all those costs incurred by the Vatican. That doesn't help anybody. So he's really, really conflating this.
Selling every asset the church has, even at the highest estimate, would do less than the US government does in 1 year. And look at all the world would lose if it did. Besides the spiritual wonder of gorgeous cathedrals and the comfort of religious ceremonies, let's not forget that the assets of the Catholic Church allow it to be the largest charitable organization in the world, providing priceless services to the most desperate.
And once again, these are being subsidized by at least the United States. There may be other governments that actually do that. That means the government pays for these organizations to do what they are doing. And in the meantime, the Catholic Church can say, God did it. Be Catholic and give us money. So they are not losing money by doing these different organizations, these different charitable things. And I don't mind the fact when organizations do help people. And if they make a lot of money and help a lot of people, then that's even better. But let's not lie about it. And let's not use it for a cover just to prophesize, just to evangelize.
Count every church and organization run by Catholics as an asset, then you can't forget the innumerable and irreplaceable services provided by churches, charitable organizations like Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services, hospitals, schools, shelters, and orphanages.
What other organizations are doing does not matter. What matters is the Catholic Church and what they are doing. So he's really, really stretching it, again, by saying, look what they're doing. And so what we're doing isn't bad, it's justified. No, we don't care.
Yeah, we could sell every building and give to the poor, but we actually give the poor so much more, year after year, by working in those buildings. Now, does this mean that our finances are perfect, that there's nothing we could do to be better? Absolutely not. I know for sure that there is a lot of money hidden in some of our churches being used to line some people's pockets and spent.
The thing is here, if God does not want people to be poor, it would not be possible for them to be poor. If people are disadvantaged, they don't have fresh, clean water. If God wanted them to have fresh, clean water, they would, and nothing could stop that from happening. With that being said, if you are doing anything to help these people, you are acting against the will of God. If you don't like that, why is it that God requires people to send money to do whatever God obviously cannot do? Why does anyone from any church have to do anything? Why is God incapable of doing it himself? So once again, if he wanted everyone to know whatever it is that he wanted, if he wanted people to not be poor, to not be hungry, to not be cold, then it simply would not happen.
It's unsuperfluous luxury items. Like Pope Francis, I really wish we had a poor church for the poor, and I know that we're nowhere near that. But to suggest that the Catholic Church universally is rich, just sitting on a load of cash that could easily benefit the poor,
would be accurate,
is ludicrous. Our greatest riches are not liquid and are actually shared publicly with the world.
Not even close to being true. You can Google that for that matter. The Vatican has not released its finance. I don't see any reason why it would have to. I mean, it's an independent country. It can do whatever it wants to. It has not released what it makes a year at any time. So that's completely false.
And the vast majority of what we do and have is put towards the life of the poor and the mission of Christ. Sell all we have and give to the poor? I'd argue that we're already doing that.
We're already doing that. Remember those pictures he showed at the there we go. Oh yes, we're already doing that. What did we get out of this? Sell everything to give to the poor. Well, actually, he didn't really answer that question. He did a little bit. If you were to sell the actual assets, the artifacts in the Vatican itself, it would not come to a whole lot, like $1 billion. I would accept that as being correct. It's probably a lot more, probably closer to 2 or 3 if they're admitting to that much. it would only go so far. Then he goes on to try to justify the corporation and lie about how the corporation worked. And then again, as I predicted, he did not mention the nice little Bible verse where Jesus tells his disciples to sell everything and give to the poor. And obviously the diocese has not done that, any of the dioceses. This is compelled unbeliever. I no longer believe there is a God.